Right now, former President Donald Trump's lawyers are weighing whether they will call any witnesses in the civil rape trial here in New York City.
If they don't, closing arguments are set for Monday. Former columnist E. Jean Carroll is accusing Trump of raping her decades ago in a department store and then defaming her when he denied her claim. The jury this week heard portions of the former president's sworn deposition. Both sides rested their cases yesterday. Although the Trump team did not call any witnesses at trial, the former president is defending himself in public.
I'll be going back to New York. I was falsely accused by this woman. I have no idea who she is. We have a judge that doesn't like me much, appointed by Bill Clinton.
CBS News reporter Graham Cates joins us now. He's been covering this trial extensively, has been in the courtroom and can let us know what's been happening. Graham, is there any world in which we see the former president testify, his legal team deciding that that will be beneficial?
Well, the judges opened a window or opened a door that we thought was shut. They had a previous deadline to say that he would testify, and that deadline, before that deadline came, they said he's not going to. But after those comments yesterday, the judge said, "I'm going to kind of reopen the door. I'm going to give him until 5 p.m. on Sunday to say once and for all whether he's going to come." And that's because if he doesn't come on Monday, that's when closing arguments are going to begin. So once closings begin, that means that there's no more testimony. That said, his team has maintained now for several days that he won't be in attendance, and that hasn't changed. The judge instructed them to discuss this new opportunity with him, but we haven't yet heard anything to make us think that it will happen. And that's with the caveat that with former President Donald Trump, I certainly wouldn't want to say for sure that he's going to say no, given this other opportunity. But so far, we haven't heard from his legal team that he is going to.
All right. Well, Graham, the jury this week heard portions of the former president's sworn deposition. Talk to us about what they learned.
Well, so some of this deposition was already out there for the public to read, but certainly not to see the video of it. And some of it was new. What they saw was a person who was combative, unapologetic. He repeated some of the claims we've heard that are actually at the center of a defamation claim that E. Jean Carroll is not his type. He even pointed to her attorney, Roberta Kaplan, and said, and neither are you. They saw the moment when he was shown a photo that had him, his then wife, Ivana Trump, E. Jean Carroll, and her ex-husband, John Johnson. And he was asked to identify the people in it. And when it came to Carroll, and this was way back in the 1980s, he said, "That's Marla Maples," referring to one of his other ex-wives. And then was corrected, "No, that's E. Jean Carroll, the person who's pressing this claim against you." To which he said, "Oh, the photo is blurry." And so these are kind of crucial, important moments for various parts of our claim, including this idea that if it were to be the case that he attacked her, it would also be a lie and defamatory for him to say, "And she wasn't my type," in trying to defend himself. This is a way of showing, well, maybe she was his type.
And I guess the challenge then is if the former president does not testify and you've got these closing arguments set for Monday, the judge and the jury are left with the impressions from all that they've seen in the courtroom and E. Jean Carroll's testimony. So just summarize for us, Graham, what arguments is each side making here? It seems like it's a simple, she said he did it and he says he didn't.
Sure. So in order to determine that he is liable for this alleged attack, the plaintiffs would have had to show a preponderance of evidence, which is a lower standard than the reasonable doubt you'd have to have in a criminal case, that he attacked her. And so that's going to be the first thing that they have to examine. And the argument's going to be E. Jean Carroll remembers this very vividly. She was able to describe kind of in great detail elements of the attack, and then they were matched by what she says she told her friends in the mid-1990s, two friends specifically who testified at trial, one who she said she called almost right after the attack. And that friend's story largely matched up with what she said she told her, what she called her in those moments. And then another one who she told the next day. And then the other part is that they were shown two other people testified who made similar claims about Trump, that he assaulted them. And that's part of this effort to show a pattern that this wasn't just E. Jean Carroll, that over time there were a couple other people who have said the same thing. And then, of course, they were showing the kind of infamous Access Hollywood tape where Trump described grabbing a woman's genitals, which is, of course, at the core of E. Jean Carroll's claim against him, that he did that. And so that's the part where they're trying to show he was involved in this attack, and there's a pattern there. And then the defamation is where he said she lied about it, where he said she wasn't my type, and a series of statements along those lines calling her a liar. So that's their side of it. And Trump's team's side of it has been that the story doesn't make sense, and that there are inconsistencies over time in the way she's told the story and the way her friends have presented themselves.
All right, Graham Cates. Graham, thank you very much.
Thank you.